Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CMC. The Columbus Metropolitan Club connects people and ideas through community conversations just like this one each and every week. My name is Tony Bell. I am the president and CEO of Phoenix Consulting Company, and I am also a proud board member and lifetime member of the Columbus Metropolitan Club. For those of you joining us by live stream, we want to say thank you and to let you know that we are coming to you from the Ellis in Columbus's historic Victorian Village. And I'd like to say welcome to everyone. We are super duper grateful for today's sponsors, the Robert Weiler Company. Hi, Bob. And it's such an honor to have Robert Weiler himself here today with his crew. Also, thank you so much for our table sponsors today. We have Communities and Schools and the Huckleberry House. Great to have you. And thank you to our presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at your one and only Columbus Foundation. Our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch, and the Ellis for hosting us. Every CMC forum takes a what? Begins with a V. There you go. 3 of you said it. Village. And now that you all know, the Columbus, it takes a what? Village. Right. So to make these forums happen each and every week. Today's forum is a super special one. We are honored to be joined once again by our very own Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who has represented the Ohio's 3rd Congressional District since 2013, but she's been serving ever since she was born. Today we'll cover Congresswoman Beatty's legislative priorities and unpack current events in Washington for an in-depth look at the current state of federal politics in the U.S. and U.S. democracy. It is now my great honor to welcome our distinguished guest. Please welcome Congresswoman Joyce Beatty from the United States House of Representatives, Ohio's 3rd Congressional District. And for those of you who are joining us by live stream, she's getting a standing ovation, people. A standing ovation. Woo-hoo! You guys make me feel like she's in The Lion King. Can you feel the love today? You're welcome. You enjoy it. And our host, also returning once again to the CMC, Karen Kasler, Chief of the Statehouse News Bureau. And I know in our hearts we're giving her a standing ovation too, because being able to be impartial and so wise and committed during these turbulent times must be a task of titanic proportions. So Karen, we look forward to you guiding this conversation. Thank you to both of you.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be talking to my U.S. Representative, Joyce Beatty. And one of the fun things about being in her district is I used to run into her and Otto. And I remember having a spirited conversation in the lighting section of Home Depot one time. But this is a great conversation I think we're going to have today because there's no shortage of things to talk about. So you folks will have a chance to ask questions, but I'm just going to go ahead and get started with something I saw that you wrote on X recently. You wrote, "The Trump administration thrives on causing chaos and confusion in your community, but Democrats aren't afraid to fight back against the GOP to protect your benefits, programs, and rights." I think there are a lot of people who are very frustrated with what's been happening. Not only people here in Franklin County, and not only in blue areas, but around the state and around the country. And they want to know what Democrats are specifically doing besides giving speeches and holding rallies. What's happening? Is there something happening behind the scenes that we need to look for? What are Democrats really doing about what's been going on?
No, first of all, let me just say thank you for everyone being here because we are in a critical time, not only in our community, but across this amazing America that we live in. And so I think when you asked us, that's the question that we get a lot. What are we doing in Congress? Well, first of all, we have to be able to communicate. and let people know what's really happening. And I think we're doing a great job at that. Just recently, I held a teletown hall and did it in a studio with other members of Congress so we could get out the information. We had some 24,000 people on social media to stream it. We had 8,400 people who stayed on for most of the teletown hall, where we walked them through what that chaos and confusion. Is that enough? Absolutely not. We're doing legacy media or traditional media, but we're also going to what I call new school media. So many people are on social media. They are looking at Instagram. They're looking at X and Twitter and TikTok, if you must. And so those are the things that we also have to start communicating with. And we also have to do podcasts. So nothing's off limit right now. But I do think it's important, and this is very personal to me, when you start talking about slashing health care, when you start talking about taking away funds to the tune of $800 billion of dollars. When we talk about food service, we talk about our children. When you talk about dismantling our public educational system, it becomes very personal. I'm a product of public schools and public and state-supported universities, and I'm very proud of that. And I think if you look at my track record, I did okay in those public schools. So we are also out in the fight. I believe, I'm unapologetic about who I am. I believe in standing up and fighting. When they were attacking our voting rights, I got arrested for it. I've been pepper sprayed when I was standing with young people who were mistreated, because if you're going to lead, you need to lead. And so when they went to the Department of Education, when they went to Treasury, taking our data, our information, our Social Security numbers, I went and stood in the line with those employees. So see, it's not, Karen, it's not about me. It's about those people who were fired and laid off without notice, lied to about 7 months. So when they went over to CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that makes sure that your monies and your mortgages and everything are protected, since the inception, they have discovered $21 billion against people like the people in this room. So going out and protesting and marching and putting Elon Musk and Donald Trump on notice is what we have to do, because I also have had so many people respond to me that it gave them hope, that someone was out there, outside of the office, outside of the pen and paper, standing up, making them feel that hope was on the way. And if you think about most of the things in our history, what has gotten us, think about the Affordable Care Act, when those women, black, white, and brown, went out there with those pink hats. We were in the minority, and some 70 times they tried to repeal our health care, and we were victorious. Think about the right to vote. I mean, I could walk you through history, 1963, 1964, 1965, civil rights, voting rights, the Job Act. All of those things happened in part because we were doing everything. We were protesting in a peaceful way. We were standing up for our freedoms and our rights. And you had leaders standing with the people. And that's the most important thing. We can't do it alone. I can go on that House floor every day and write a piece of legislation. But if you don't respond and write back and stand up and fight for what's your right, and if we don't do it together, it's not going to do anything. And so I think it's making a small difference, because we have 90-some executive orders by Donald Trump, but we've also had, in certain legal cases, in one case, 19 attorney generals from 22 states, and they were victorious. They were able to get those dollars that were frozen. They're no longer frozen because they filed cases. We had 22 attorney generals to file lawsuits so people aren't afraid. But what happens this morning? They fire our judge in the Ohio Southern District. Judge Parker walked in and fired him today. So if we don't speak up, write up, educate up, legislate up, litigate up, we're going to go back in history. And I sometimes believe history repeats itself. We will go into a dictatorship.
You speak of executive orders. Oh, there was an executive order signed in the last, I think, 24 hours that said that only Trump and his Attorney General Pam Bondi can determine and interpret what the law is. With all the things that you just talked about with what he and Elon Musk have been doing, are you ready to call this a coup? Do you think what's happening is legal?
We know that most of it is not legal. Now look at this. Look at this room, and you understand, you vote, you understand how we elect people. You explain to me how Elon Musk can speak to America from the Oval Office. He was not vetted. He was not elected by anyone. How can he walk in and fire people just because the president said he's my friend and he's a billionaire? No, it's not legal. Nor is it legal for him to say only the person that he has assigned to this role can do that. It's not legal. And the good thing is, because I always want to leave some hope, there are attorney generals, there are law firms, there are people who are standing up and fighting. And here's the other good news that I thank you for voting. We are only 3 short of members in the Congress. We only need 3 Republicans. We only need 3 Republicans. Our margin is 215 to 218. So I'm not here just blowing up smoke and saying we can do this. We only need 3. And you're not going to convince me that out of 218 people that they all believe that this is okay and this is legal. And you know why? Because now it's affecting them. You see, when people talk about taking away programs, many people sit around and say, well, you know, I don't get any money for that program. It's not going to affect me. Now they're talking about Medicare. So all you have to do is be 65 years or older. It has nothing to do with your income or someone who's poor. Talking about Medicare, talking about Social Security, talking about public education. Dismantling that will hurt our children and our grandchildren. So we have to continue. We need private sector. We need attorneys who band together as individuals and take this on. We need an army of folks to join us.
Is this a coup? Is this a constitutional crisis?
It is. I mean, they have no respect. 3 people came up to me and spoke today, and I heard they have no respect for the rule of law. They have no respect for the Constitution, and they certainly don't understand our democracy and what democracy means, because it's autocracy. I mean, when you think about what it really is, and the oligarchs, all of the billionaires, when you think about how this country operates, when you think of us having appropriation and a budget that we are by the Constitution required to do on specific dates to continue this America to operate. We are still negotiating with this, and we only have until March 14th, and the government could shut down. So if we don't negotiate or find at least 3 people on the other side who will understand, in a world that we're living in now, take away fire and police, take away all of the government workers that would no longer be allowed to come to work if we shut down, not alone that they're not going to get a check, and how it's going to affect businesses. And, you know, it's going to affect mortgages, it's going to affect car loans, it's going to affect everything that we do. So, yes, we have to be prepared for what he's doing.
In the discussions about what's been actually targeted here, you've got the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau,
Yes.
which you've spoken about a lot, USAID, the Department of Education, the FAA. These have impacts not only across the country, but here in Central Ohio as well.
Well, it has impact here because when you look at when they do away with something, whether it's in healthcare, the $230-some million with food assistance, when you look at child care, sure, it has effect. It has effect on the number of people who will lose their jobs here. Because the reach has come down into the government level, at the county level. So yes, it will have effect. Prices will go up. Come on, if you put tariffs and taxes or anything, we already know. I'm in Washington, D.C. 4 out of the 5 working days. And I went into the grocery store just to kind of price out some things. Eggs in Washington, D.C., $14.99 for 1 dozen of regular eggs, not organic, not anything. $14.99. I went to the store here in my district. Eggs were $7.99. I remember when I could get eggs for $1.99 or $2.49. So it's having an effect. I put the eggs back. Now, I obviously had $7.99 and $14.99, but it was a principle because the lady next to me, she said, I can't do this. I can't afford half of the stuff in there. And I felt her pain. I mean, it is affecting us, absolutely.
I know that Republicans seem to have a great way of communicating with their supporters. They have used podcasts and social media and created these networks where people who think alike are communicating with each other. And I know you mentioned this earlier, but have Democrats done enough to really get out there and get their messages across? Like, for instance, the whole idea of the economy. The economy under Biden was strong, but many people going into the election last year didn't feel that way. What can Democrats do? Can they be more forceful in how they communicate? Because certainly Republicans are very, that whole straight talk thing is right. Something that Republicans pride themselves on.
I think that's an excellent question, and let me just tell you, did we do enough? No. Did we have a message that resonated with the everyday folks? No. Lessons learned. Part of the reason in the election, people did not believe that Donald Trump would win because there was history there, 34 indictments, but then there were people who needed to hear the things he said. Now, there were lies, but if you hear the same thing repeatedly enough, I'm going to make it better. I'm going to cut the fat out of government. All of the things. Our message was too in the weeds. Our message was too symbolic. We had a great tagline, and I said it in just about every speech because I was told to say it. We're going to put people over politics. Now, it sounded good in that conference room in Washington, D.C., and my grandchild said to me, Grandma, you always say that put people for politics. And then the operative words were, what does that mean? And then I said, well, it means we're going to put food and we're going to be protecting your mortgage and house. And my grandchild said, why didn't you just say that? That you're not going to play politics. You're going to make sure that I can go to school. You're going to make sure that they keep my lunch program. You're going to make sure that they keep the funds for communities in school in Ohio. She said, why don't you just say it? And so now, lessons learned. We are now doing podcasts, and I'll give you some good news. I have been selected. We have formed, just last Friday, a strike team with messaging. Our messaging has to change. We have to do the podcast. We have to be out. We have to do a little bit and a lot of everything. And I've been appointed to the strike team task force on legislation with another member from Illinois, Sean Casten, who's a brilliant lawyer, scholar. And so they paired us up because I'm better at speaking out. I'm better at being creative and coming up with a way to get the message out. So I'm announcing it here so everyone can hear that, yes, the Democrats, thanks to Joe Neguse and Hakeem Jeffries, have put together a strike team force to come out and to put it in language that relates to everyone. Whether you're in the grocery store, whether you're in the barbershop, whether you're in the library, wherever you are, that message will be strong. But what I can tell you is we're fighting, we're not giving up, and we're not going to stand and let this continue to happen. And we have been able to move the needle somewhat with stopping some of it.
You're going to be talking to a group of Ohio State students this evening. And I want to ask you specifically about some things that are happening with universities in Ohio. We just had Senate Bill 1 pass. Yes. This is Senate Bill 83 brought back. This is the one that would ban most diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, ban faculty strikes, among other things. And of course, you have the Trump administration now sending a letter to school districts and to universities saying they have 14 days to eliminate race-based decision-making. Is this legal? How can this happen in 14 days?
Well, there's something called the 14th Amendment. There's something called equal opportunity that's written into the Constitution. But here's the thing. It's happening. Some people are afraid and they're panicking because people are losing their jobs. They're coming in and saying if diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility, they're now including people who have disabilities. They're including veterans in this. And they're saying it's also a violation of your freedom of speech because in that Senate Bill 1, they also say you can't talk about climate. They have buzzwords that you can't use in there. So here's what's happening. Just here in our community, we had J.P. Morgan Chase the other day say they're going to continue with their programs. I was talking to Barbara Benham earlier, and we talked about our local bank, Huntington, and how they're continuing to help people. Comcast just gave me $3 million for a Congressional Black Caucus endowment fund. So we have to learn how to change our script. We have to play their game because the end game is to still provide funds and help those and increase our talent pool. So words matter. So if you have diversity, equity, and inclusion, you mentioned Ohio State. President Ted Carter wrote an amazing letter that he will continue to provide equal opportunity. He will continue to broaden the talent base. He will continue to look for folks in various communities and places. And so there will be those who are doing the right thing that will continue to do the right thing. But there will be those who will use this as a scapegoat because they don't want to do the right thing anyway. And so we have to stay out there, and it's like playing chess. You know, we are smarter. They just have more money. Donald and Elon Musk have more money, but they are not smarter than us. And at the end, they're going to get a divorce because Elon Musk is running the show, and he's going to say the wrong thing to Donald Trump on one morning, and they're going to get a divorce. And we're going to get all the babies and the children because we're going to be right there to divide up their assets and take back what belongs to us. But we have to stay in the game. I know it's scary. People are telling me they're afraid. People are losing their jobs and family members, but we must stay in the game. We know history repeats itself. We have been on this road before. And if you're old as some of us, like I am and others, you have experienced what you thought was the worst thing in your lifetime. And here we are today. We will get through this. And that is the hope that I want you to have. Now, is it going to be easy? I'm not going to lie to you. Absolutely not. Is it going to be scary at times? Yes. But you cannot give up everything that you've done to be in this space, in this place, and what you do.
You know, you have some Republicans coming after you for exactly what you just said there. Thing, the whole idea of wordsmithing the language is wrong. I mean,
well, let them come. You know, I have a lot of words for many of them I can't say in here right now. But that's what we have to do back to them. And we also have to tell them, you know, I know some people that said, yeah, I voted for Donald Trump, but I didn't think he was coming after me. You know, and I said, now you're getting just what you deserved. And for those folks who thought it was okay not to vote or to hold their vote, it all goes back to how important your vote in one vote can make a difference. And so we also have to look at those folks who aren't doing the right thing, and we have to say, we're not supporting you. You know, if you're not with us and you're not standing up for the American people, I mean, come on, we just celebrated at the end of last year Rosa Parks. If that one little lady could decide that she wasn't going to get on that bus anymore because what they did was wrong, and for 365 days, those folks didn't get on a bus, they needed their money to go to work, they walked. They won the fight. So we have to be willing to win the fight, but you have to be in the fight to win the fight.
There's a whole subtext going on here with the discussion about DEI
Yes.
in general. And somebody was just saying to me earlier how fast this all seems to be happening. There was progress made for so many years, and now all of a sudden, this vague concept of getting rid of DEI is the main talking point here.
Well, I think that's the fear. Come on. If you want to be a dictator, then you're afraid of all the other people who are successful, all the other people who are in your way, in your space. And what diversity, equity, and inclusion did, it opened up the world in banking, in tech, in just about every operation to look like this room. Now, you didn't say diversity, equity, and inclusion to come out here to this program. You said, let's come and learn about what we need to know in our communities, in our Congress, in our world. And DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, showed up. Nobody said you had to have so many of this, so many of that, but when you're doing the right thing like CMC is doing, this is what you get. So I don't want people to think diversity and equity and inclusion was a game or stage. We simply said, and I can say this, I was the first ever in the United States Congress to be the chair of diversity and inclusion. And at that time, we brought in every bank president that had more than $50 billion in assets in their bank. And we lined them up. And every one of them came, picked them. Wells Fargo, picked U.S. Bank, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs. All of their presidents and CEOs came. And we asked them, not a number, not a quota. I don't believe in that. And whoever came up with that idea years ago when we started affirmative action that 8% or 12 or 15% was good, we were crazy. But we were so thirsty to get something. Because remember, it was on a scale of 100. Come on, you can do math. How the heck is 8% or 10% on a 100% scale something you should brag about? But we moved the needle with them. You started getting diversity and equity managers. Then we made them no longer report to HR, but to report to the president and CEO. Then we went in and looked at who's on your board. We didn't find women, black, white, brown, or other. So then we started going after them to make sure that they were more inclusive. And we didn't stop there because they would go and say, oh, I hired 12 minority employees. And then you say, well, where do they work and report to? Nothing wrong with you being on a line job, but none of them were up in the C-suites. Then we start looking at, well, who's on your board? And I can tell you within the 2 years with that, we moved the needle. People of color, people with disabilities, veterans, people who lived in rural America. It's not just race and gender. People got jobs in the C-suite. More women start being placed on corporate boards. And that was because we were intentional. It was not a social thing to do. It was a business thing to do. And it was what was good for America. And so now you have people of power who look like this room. And now if you're going to have a dictatorship, then you dismantle that. And what else do you dismantle? Universities and education that educate people. And that's what's happening, and we're going to continue to fight against it.
What can people, we're going to turn it over to you folks with, I know you've got questions for the Congresswoman, but I want to ask you one final question from me. What can people in this room, people who are on the live stream, people who are just concerned in general, what can they do? Because certainly reaching out to members of Congress, emailing, calling, that sort of thing, protesting, marching, those things are being done. What can people really do that will have an impact?
I think you have to call out and you have to write to everybody. Don't just send me a letter. You know, send those other folks. Now, they tell us, if I'm in my official capacity, what I can't tell you is to call all those Republicans who are voting the wrong way. Now, I can't tell you that, but because they say, don't tell them to just call Republicans. You have to tell them to call all of the Congress people. So, you know, I don't want to violate anything by saying, just call the Republicans who aren't voting with you. And I don't mean on your personal, this is not partisan. This is not partisan. This is about someone who is voting to tell you, you can't tell your child what you want them to learn. This is someone who is telling you that they believe it's okay to dismantle the Department of Education. They think it's okay to no longer have Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. That it's okay to not put monies into agriculture for the farmers who grow the crop that goes into SNAP programs. It's okay to shut the government down because this administration is protecting the top 1% and 2% who are billionaires and forget about the rest of us. So you need to call those folks and call them out. You need to write letters to the editorial and put the names in it. When I do something wrong, y'all know how to reach me and say, oh, Congresswoman Beatty, I like you, but I didn't like how you voted on this. Or Congresswoman, how come we didn't get the funds from your project and so got it? So I want you to do the same thing to everybody. The infrastructure dollars that gave us internet for those children in schools in rural and urban areas that didn't have a laptop. We had people right here in Central Ohio who voted against that. You need to call them out by name because this is serious. And you need to call them and say, I'm getting ready to write to the local paper, or I'm going to the chamber, the junior league, city hall, to the townships, and I'm calling you out to the voters because I don't understand why you're not standing up for democracy, why you're not standing up for the rule of law, why you aren't voting to make sure people keep their jobs. And I think that's simple. That's not partisan. And you have a right to know that because there are good Democrats and good Republicans who know better. They just need to hear it more from just me.
And now we'd like to hear from you with your questions, questions from the room, questions from the live stream. And remember, questions end in a question mark, so keep that in mind as you're formulating what you want to say. Go ahead, Sophia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Congresswoman Beatty. For those in the audience, feel free to join me at the podium if you have questions for Congresswoman. And remember that at CMC, questions have two things in common. One, they're 30 seconds or less, and in our great tradition, they end with what type of punctuation? A question mark, absolutely. For those who are joining from live stream, feel free to text your questions or type them into the chat. I'll get them on my phone. Our first question comes from Ann Hokie. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. What does the House Democratic Party think is the way to cut waste and fraud from executive agencies? And more importantly, what is the Democratic Party's role in raising the debt ceiling in March?
I think that's a very good question, and so let me answer it like this: when you're giving out $4 trillion in tax breaks for the top percent, and then Republicans are saying there is waste in government, and they're doing away the programs and the things that are not discretionary. They're getting rid of mandatory programs that were set by the government. Now, what we are doing is participating in an appropriation process, a budget process, and an oversight process to look at the waste. Now, I'm not going to say that government is perfect and we don't have things that need to be cut. So the way this works, we submit a budget, Republicans submit a budget, and a lot of the other organizations will put their thoughts to what they think the budget should look like. And in all of those budgets, people either cut, transfer, or ask for less or more money. And so we support taking waste out of government. What we don't support is blindly saying that waste is doing away with the Affordable Care Act and the insurance that people have, or letting 26-year-olds still stay on their parents' insurance. We don't believe that you do away with the waste by getting rid of tax incentive programs and programs that help people with their utility bills. And so what they're doing is just going right across the board and saying basically, and these are my words, basically, well, if you're poor and poor, everything is relative. Everybody in this room is poor, according to what they're doing, unless you're talking about having trillions and hundreds of billions of dollars. So they have no regard for hardworking people. And so their definition of waste and our definition of waste is entirely different. Now, raising the debt ceiling, let me just tell you, we have raised this debt ceiling under Trump when he was the president in 2017. We've raised the debt ceiling under Barack Obama. We've raised the debt ceiling on Joe Biden, but with reason. Now, here's what happens, and you need to remember this in knowing how it operates to that person, and it's a good question. But here's the thing. It's when you ask for something, they ask to run this country. They have the administration, they have the Senate, and they have the House. Now, you tell me what they're running. You have two people who are running this country and making the determination on the debt ceiling and the waste. That's not our responsibility, but we're not irresponsible, so we're trying to participate in this. But that question needs to be asked to everybody that took the oath to serve us, that sits on the other side of the aisle, that are chairing these committees. And they're not answering your questions because they know there's no way in heck that they can tell you they're doing the right thing.
Thanks for coming. It's great to see you. My question is, what will happen if the administration starts to ignore court orders?
Well, we're in that process now. We're going to have more litigation, and that's why I said to Karen's question earlier, there's three things Democrats are doing in our messaging. We're communicating, keeping you informed so you know what's real and what's not, and what's protected and what's not. And then, unfortunately, there's litigation. When you look at 90 executive orders, and when you look at more than some 50 court cases across this country, and we're winning on many of them, and then there's legislation. We have a bill, I don't know if the title is the best serving, but it's what we have at this time, to stop the Steal Act, to stop them from stealing everything that they're doing. And it's getting a lot of attention. We have the strike team because we still have a government that's working in our legal system. We still have attorney generals who are banding together from multiple states, and they're making progress. Thank you for that question.
My name's Jane Scott. I'm very concerned about Ukraine and the abrupt policy change that apparently came over the other day. What is Congress going to do to push back on the fact that Ukraine didn't start that war?
Absolutely.
And everything that's coming out right now is just terrifying to me in terms of the collapse of Europe. What's Congress going to do about it?
Well, one of the things that we're doing, I feel, I assume from what you said, the same way that you are, but here's the question. The Congress is the Republican Party right now. They are the only ones that can bring a bill to the floor. They're the only ones that can approve a bill to go into a committee. And so one of the things we have to do is start asking that question to all of the Congress. So often, we're the ones holding the town halls because we're not afraid to come out and tell you, here's what we're doing, and when we're wrong, we're wrong. You know, we've all made mistakes, but that question, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's what J.D. Vance, who came from Ohio, is doing right now in Europe. What he's doing with trying to take away the freedom of speech and stirring up all this. And I think they're doing this whether it's the Ukraine, whether it's Gaza, whether it's anything else that we're looking at that just treads on us because it's so wrong. They're doing that to sidetrack us and get the attention while they're coming back and undergirding everything else. Education, healthcare. Think about the things they're going after. Treasury, CFPB, education. I mean, just think about if you wipe out Social Security and Medicare. You're not just talking about poor people. Look at what they're saying about immigration. They're doing everything to dismantle and get rid of everything that they can have control. And let me tell you why it's not going to work. When they're firing all these people that are the threading the needle to how this country runs, and they're getting rid of them, who's going to then run the country? It won't work for them because they don't have, unless we allow them, to your question, if we don't write that Ukraine or that European question to every member of Congress and tell them to stop, so you have to be stronger language, to stop because you have a vote. And we have an off-year presidential election coming back in 2026. We're in the fight for our life now. So if you don't get out there and make sure that you vote and vote for people who are going to stand up, not just for us. This is about the American people. My role is to protect the people. And so you have to vote because we could take back the House. And if we took back the House and the Senate, then I can give you a better answer because we would be in charge and I could give you the hope and I could tell you, as we've done before, Donald Trump put those executive orders in when he was the president before. Joe Biden came in and undid every one of those executive orders. Our unemployment rate was lower than it had ever been. Our inflation, our economy, according to Jay Powell, chair of the Federal Reserve, we were in a good place. And look at us now.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for your time with us today. I guess, I hear everything that you're sharing in terms of the hope and the margin of error. My question is, what does our last line of defense look like? I mean, what does it look like should some of these things not come to fruition? Thank you.
Well, I think the only thing we'd have to do is keep in mind, while they can dismantle and rebuild, it's going to take more than a day or a month. It's the 2-year cycle. So it's voting. It's getting people registered. When you think of it, you're thinking of what's happening in this country with the number of people who are in the United States, and then you're talking about 218 people stopping that. Something's wrong with the math with that. So the same questions you are asking me, they're coming back to you. What are you doing? I mean, people are saying, well, what are we doing? We're using the pen, we're using the voice, we're using the protest. How many people here have written a letter? I'm not going to embarrass you. How many people in here wrote a letter to Speaker Johnson? How many people even know who Michael Johnson is? Come on. There's somebody in this room who does not know their congressperson. There's somebody in this room that has never written a letter and is going to lose part of their health care benefits. So the question comes back, if this comes to fruition, then we're going to need a lot more than Joyce Beatty trying to give you hope. Because you know what will happen? Then you'll say, Congresswoman, how do we fight? Where do I go? Because, see, I got this letter. And they're telling me in 10 days, I no longer have the loan on my mortgage. So I'm trying to help you not be in that position. This is not just for people who live on the street. Do you know what a homeless man, when I stopped to ask him how he was going, he said, Congresswoman? So don't confuse poverty with intellect. I get a lot of wisdom from this guy. I said, hey, what are you thinking? You know what he said to me? He said, I'm thinking that it's not going to bother me. I'm already eating out of trash cans, and I'm already on the street. He said, so you better go tell the people it's not the poor people that they're thinking about. It's the hard-working Americans. It's those folks that make $100,000 and $200,000 and $300,000 and $400,000 of dollars that thought they were free. He said, with this administration, if your question comes to reality, you're not going to be any different than Mr. Henry, who's out there on the street. Because he's not coming after them. He's coming after our parents, and he's coming out of our children. You know how many children who are sick and ill and disabled are on Medicaid? Most people say, oh, that's Medicaid. I'm not on any TANF or welfare. Think about those children who are getting Medicaid. And then think about in this room, anybody, and there's somebody in this room other than me that's 65 years old or older. They're getting ready to take y'all's Medicare, okay? So.
Two questions in one. One is, what can ordinary Americans do to reestablish their trust in institutions? And on a more practical level, Sarah Block asks, what is the best media to use to communicate with congressional representatives? Calls, only, letters? What would you recommend?
It's interesting because we are as diverse as this room. Calls always work for me. Because somebody picks up the phone in our offices. And don't be offended if you get a staff person or a chief of staff when you do it. Go in stronger with them, because every member is not going to see you, or they're not going to answer the phone. So you have to say, I'm a voter. And if you're talking to those folks, I can't tell you just to call the Republicans, but if you're talking to those other folks, you tell them, and the same thing you tell Democrats, because all Democrats might not be on the right page. So you tell them, I'm a voter, I'm writing down your boss's name, and we are not going to stand for this, and if he loses, you lose a job. And then you tell them, and I'm going to call back tomorrow to ask you for the answer that you said to Bob. Just keep calling. It frustrates the heck out of staff, senior staff. And then you know what they do? They call and say, Congresswoman, can you call Mrs. Clark back? Because she done called here every day. And they're human. And the junior staff that answers the phone, they get scared and emotional. They say, oh no, somebody used a bad word at me. And somebody screamed at me. And then they come in, you know, they're 25, 26 years old, and they'll say, Congresswoman, are we really taking people's health care? So I say, yeah, and they get ready to take yours. So let's get with the program. And then we call the people back. Now, if you have emails, that still works. But I tell you what works, because we have to live by social media now. Whether you like it or not, social media, fortunately and unfortunately, still is a way that a lot of people get their information. But then there are those of us who do legacy media. I listen to the radio. I watch CNN. I watch C-SPAN. I watch MSNBC. I watch Fox on some days, because I need to know what America's thinking. Not just Democrats, but Democrats, Republicans, independents, the far progressives. So I think you divide it up. But you don't stop. You have to be consistent, and you have to do it often. You have to make us as angry as you should be. And that's what works.
Congresswoman, we have 3 more questions and about 5 more minutes. So
that's code for me to give a shorter answer. Okay, I have
questioners to be really concise as well. So thank you so much.
So I am asking a question on behalf of my mother, who is recovering from a surgery. She is in the over 65 range, well over that. She keeps texting me because she knows I'm here to ask, what are we doing toward impeachment for committing a coup?
That is not off the table. But right now, it's not off the table. And I'm not just saying this. We have had, I'm going to mess up the number, 5 impeachment managers in the last 5 or 6 years to do this. But it is a lot different as a sitting president. Come on, let me just be real here. You had a person who was a former president with 34 indictments. I don't know about you, but if any brother in this room had an indictment of 1 or 2, he'd be incarcerated, okay? So we don't want to be performative and theatrical only, but we do know it grits at Donald Trump. We do know that he can't take the same game he puts out there. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is litigate and legislate as much as we can, but it is not off the table because people like your mother and parents with children, we can't take anything off the table to save their lives. And so whether it is looking at impeachment, whether it is the strike team, whether it is the media team, we are saying to them, we are not afraid, and I've used those words, we're coming after you. And they don't like it. Now, nobody from the administration should be calling little old Joyce Beatty back, but they have several of us as members on their list. That's a good sign. Now, my staff over here thinks it's a bad sign because I have to have so much security around me in big public places, and they come to my home and all of that kind of stuff. But it works, whether it is the impeachment, whether it is the lawsuits with the attorney generals, whether it's us protesting, because it doesn't matter how insensitive, unintelligent, or crazy you are, nobody likes the personal attacks. And Donald Trump has a problem when people say he's not in charge. And so right now, we're going after Elon Musk to make sure that upsets Donald Trump.
Thank you.
Congresswoman Beatty, you've explained how to get through to you. How do we get through to John Husted and Moreno?
Here's the thing. There are two new senators, and it is easy to get through to them the same way. Their offices are listed, and you call them, and you say, hey, look, John Husted, you're not even in your own term. They're fulfilling terms. So they have to run in their own right. And so you need to be really strong with them. While you got these little appointments, you have to come before the people. And you have to tell them what you expect them to do. John Husted, you have children. How could you do this? And I think those are the kinds of things you have to come at them strong. You email them, you call them, you protest them. They have offices, in the state of Ohio. They have staff that works out of Columbus. You send them letters with big markers, big red, that we are not you do things to get their attention. They're scaring you. When I came in here, at least 6 people came up to me and said, Congresswoman, I'm scared, or I'm a little scared, or should I be scared? You want to scare them, and you tell them the power of your vote.
Okay, we have one final question.
Hi, good afternoon, Congresswoman. I'm here on behalf of my father, who's permanently bedbound, and I took this question down letter by letter in binary form. Being that individuals with disabilities are the most marginalized community when it comes to political participation in the status quo, what is Congress going to do when that limited political participation in the status quo is threatened? And what would you advise everyday Americans with disabilities to be able to participate actively and effectively?
Let me say thank you, and let me say one thing about this. I can tell you when we have congressional days and individuals who come with disabilities, they have one of the largest groups of coming in and draw more attention. They have been fearless. They have come into the House chambers in wheelchairs, on crutches, and everything else, and refused to leave. So I want to thank you and say to you, the population that you're referencing, we need more of us to follow what they've done because they understand clearer what they have to lose with medical. For us, well, I don't need it unless I get sick. Well, every day they may need a new wheelchair, or like your father, they have to have round-the-care care. But here's the other thing to the first part. We will be your voice. And that's why I open this with diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Because it is really unfair. If you come after me because I'm female, I'm over 40, which is something to discriminate against, and I'm a Black American, that's one thing. But when you come after people with disabilities and our veterans, everybody in this room ought to be writing a letter for his father. Everybody in this room ought to be writing a letter for those who are marginalized and have a disability. Come on, this is our family, our community. You got up, got dressed up, and came out here. So all I'm asking you to do is to remember his question, to remember what he posed to me, which means it's to the CMC. Every organization that you work for is in jeopardy of the people in this room. And you ought to be going back to work. It's not a partisan letter. It's a survival letter. Everybody ought to be writing a letter to our 2 senators every day. Every day, write it in red, write it in green, write it in black, write it in blue, and tell them why you're writing it. You're writing it in black for power. You're writing it in blue for justice. You're writing it in red because you're angry. You're writing it in green because they're messing with your economy and your economics. And that's our survival. And that's what we have to do. I do it every day, and I'm no different than you. Every day I get on a plane, or 3 to 4 times a week, I get on a plane both ways. I get up at 5:30 a.m. just about every morning. And I'm picked up and I go into my office. I go on the United States House floor. I never miss a meeting in the morning for our whip, for our caucus, because that's how I get the information. And then everybody like Karen and every news outlet and every microphone you give me, I stand up for the American people, and we will stand up for you, young man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wish we had more time, but I want to say that my closing comments are from Martin Niemöller, and I saw this on the side of the Holocaust Museum when we were there. It says, first they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak up because I was not a socialist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up for the trade unionists because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews. And as I am inspired by Congresswoman Beatty, then they came for the federal jobs and Medicare and Medicaid and mortgage holders. And there was no one there to speak for me. There was no one left there to speak for me. I hope you found today's forum making you ready to activate, ready to make a call, write a letter, stand up, speak up, legislate up, and don't give up. And I'd like to just thank you both. Thank you, Congresswoman Beatty, and thank you, Karen Kasler. And thank you to the sponsors of today's forum, the Robert Weiler Company, and you always know I'm gonna say, thank you, Bob, for being here. Yeah, right. And thank you also to our table sponsors, Communities and Schools, Huckleberry House, and of course, the Franklin County Treasurer's Office. We are so grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness, sponsored by your one and only Columbus Foundation, and of course our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch, and to the Ellis for hosting us. Very, very special thank you again to our speakers today, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, Ohio's 3rd Congressional District Congresswoman, and our host, Karen Kasler, Chief of the Statehouse News Bureau.